I think it can be a very healthy thing for children. I don't think
You
it
can
has
see
to
the
be
smile on
heavy.
my face. Preventative therapy.
Yeah.
It's
it
there.
doesn't have to be heavy and terrible and only when they're suicidal or deep in self-harming, or it can be, do you know what, they're not doing so great, so maybe they need some help. Just like you go for physio if your knee was bad, wouldn't you? You wouldn't wait till your knee was broken. You'd go and do some exercises. And I think if we think of therapy like that, rather than a crisis situation, it could be really beneficial.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sheri Jacobson, and this is TherapyLab, a podcast dedicated to therapy, thought, and the subtle art of mental well-being. Having been on both sides of the therapist's chair, I'm interested to uncover people's personal experiences and insights about mental health, well-being, and therapy. In this episode, we are joined by authors Becky Goddard-Hill and Penny Alexander to take a look at happiness and well-being in children. In May last year, the NSPCC reported that mental health referrals in English schools have risen by more than a third in the last 3 years, while the Children's Society reported that last year, young people's happiness is at its lowest since 2010. So what is causing this and what can we do? Let's find out. So Becky, Penny, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's start off with a quick well-being check. How are you today? Scale of 1 to 10. 1 being low mood, 10 being much better mood.
For me, it's definitely a 10. I've had a great journey down here. Been to a lovely art gallery before I came. Excited to meet you. Lovely to see Penny. And nice to be able to talk about our book. So, yeah, feeling good.
A 10, look at that.
10.
Great.
Yeah, I would say I'm a 10 too. I've had a train journey always sorts me out, staring out the window, and I've had a really good week. I've tried lots of new things this week, which has really kind of put me in an excited for life mood, I think.
Excellent. Great to hear it. Good. Well, I would love to hear more about the book in summary, Create Your Own Happy, which I thought was brilliant. How would you summarize it?
So it's aimed at 7 to 11-year-olds, and it's really just a toolkit of activities that are fun and easy to try, but also there's a bit of scientific or popular psychology behind every piece. So it's kind of, this is why you would do it, this is why it works, this is what it's linked to. Because we just felt, didn't we, that children deserve to know why, and our children have always like, why? It's such a big question, and I think it can make the difference between trying something new and not trying something if you know kind of the science behind it.
I would have to say I would agree with that. It shed a lot of light on the rationale, and it made me want to try some of the tips as well. So I don't think it's only for children. I could use a lot and have done also with clients, but I thought it was really jam-packed with nuggets of advice and fabulous book. Do you want to add anything to that, Becky?
No, I think you summed it up beautifully. Yeah. They're just happiness-boosting activities for kids is how I'd sum it up. And think just an array of workable happiness-boosting activities that they can have a go at and see what works for them and hopefully carry them forward into their everyday life.
Yeah, I love that part also about sort of experimentation, that you really got, you conveyed a sense that every reader will be unique, yes, and that they will need to take out of it what suits them, and the experimentation side as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about those activities that Becky was like, I would never do that and it wouldn't work for me, and I would, like, mindful colouring drives me bonkers. I would never find that relaxing or happy bringing.
We're not the sit-still type, are we really? No.
But I've learned so much from you, particularly about, Becky worked on section 2 a lot more than I did about making others happy, and I think that's something, you're amazing at kindness and amazing at kind of recognising that when you make other people happy, it brings so much happiness into your own life, whereas for me, I was really into the section about nature and making the world happy, and I think that for me felt like a really comfortable place to kind of to engage with happiness.
I have to say I was nicely surprised by the chapter about making others happy, because it seemed like a self-centered book, yes, not in a negative way, yes, but sort of self-focused. And there was this very significant section on doing well by others, and my favorite part actually in the book was befriending someone older, which I thought is a tip that you don't hear very often and has worked for me when I was growing up as well.
And the huge richness in my life. My grandfather was a font of fun and wisdom and love and care, and it was just amazing. And in time, my husband's grandmother was the same for me. And I always really wanted my children to properly get to know them, and they've shared so many wonderful times with them. And I think whilst it makes the older person happy, what you get from it yourself is everything, you know. And you can't help but be happy when you're making other people happy, can you? It just works. It's the one thing that always works, I think. Yeah.
Fully agree with that. So what would you say is your favourite tip?
There's one in there which was inspired by my mum, which was a play therapist, so it means a lot to me. She's not around anymore, and but it was about just looking at the stars and all moments, and you know, if we have those moments where kind of we feel like a very small thing on a very big planet, it can just put all of our problems into perspective. It can be the same for looking at the clouds, but for me, I just have this really vivid memory of my mum when I was about 7, standing out in the backyard and just pointing out the plough to me. So now, you know, whenever I see that, I feel quite grounded. I feel like I'm a little lantern. There's the whole galaxy out there, and you know, sometimes the things that you worry about are then quite inconsequential. So that's got a lot of personal resonance for me.
Yeah. I can relate to that too. Not only stargazing, but sometimes when you're flying in an aircraft and seeing everything from such perspective, it really does give a different view on things. What was your favourite activity?
Well, there's one activity in the book which is about planning your day. And for a long while, there's been a lot of talk, hasn't there, about gratitude and people at the end of the day reflecting on 3 things that have gone well. But both of us read a great book by a guy called Paul Dolan called Happiness by Design, and it's about taking responsibility for your own happiness. And we took that idea and incorporated it into the fact that if children plan their day to have happiness in, they're not then at the end of the day scrabbling around thinking which bits might have been happy. It will have been happy. There will have been some happy nuggets in because they planned it first thing in the morning. So even though they might have a test, even though they've perhaps got some difficult stuff to deal with, they can plan to have half an hour with their best friend, to watch their favourite TV show, and maybe to have a really great long bubble bath with their best music playing out. And they can make sure those things happen. So they can definitely design their day to have some happy in it. And I like that because I think that's taking some control and some agency over your own life. And I think if children can learn that, they're going to do a lot better as adults, rather than feeling that they're reacting to everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, very much sort of the theme of responsibility without being onerous as well.
And power, that you do have power. You can't change everything. Some things happen and you have to deal with them, but you can change some things to bring a bit more happy in, to help you cope. And I think that's really important. I don't think I really knew that as a child. I was very reactive and very emotional, always, even as a teen. I don't think I realised I could make sure some bits were good.
And the use of the word happy, for me, I've always, as a therapist, used other words: contented life, fulfilled life. And I was quite struck at that the content didn't quite reflect happy. In other words, it allowed for moments of discontent as well. And I think you managed to convey that also through sort of mindfulness as well, that there were sort of feelings and moods come and go a little bit, like sort of transient clouds, etc. So I thought you did very well with that there. What led you to write the book in the first place?
I think our backgrounds, obviously Becky's worked in therapy and in social work, and I was a teacher. We got to know each other through writing blogs, and while that was great fun and a fabulous adventure and it's taken us all sorts of places, I think we always felt this pull back to having worked with children and to therapy and to my experience in schools, and you know that the pastoral side of school is quite frustrating sometimes as a teacher because you want to be able to do more to help. I think we always enjoyed working together. We had all these ideas, but we just felt that it would be nice to do something that was a bit more creative and that drew on our expertise. Our children are kind of in the ballpark for the book as well, so it comes from experience of being a parent as well, doesn't it? And from being parenting bloggers and seeing some of the struggles and seeing kind of children's mental health becoming much more of an issue as well, I think, and watching that unfold.
Yes, quite much more prevalent on our blog. The number of comments from youngsters is quite upsetting to see. Yeah,
definitely. I think one thing that Penny and I bonded over when we first met was that both of us had lost our mums in the year or so previously, and we were both incredibly blessed to have amazing mothers who gave us so many wisdoms and life lessons, and we really, really missed them. But we also really massively enjoyed talking about the gifts they'd given us. And in some ways, this is a sharing of things they taught us, isn't it?
There's a
You
lot
know?
of legacies from
Yeah,
our
and
mums
Penny
in
had
there, yeah.
always written about little legacies that her mum had given her as a kind of therapeutic way, hadn't you?
Yeah.
Of remembering your mum and valuing and appreciating and working through her loss. And in a way, that book contains a lot of those legacies, because children need guidance, don't they? And they need some tips and a little bit of help to get things right. And I think we can be so focused on their academic stuff and their making sure they're in all the clubs and learning the music and the physical stuff. But emotional well-being is everything, isn't it?
It is. It really should be the core curriculum.
Of course it should.
Shouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's what the book is really, isn't it? It's like
And I think, everyone has struggles, with their own children at different points in time, to do with academic struggles or personal struggles, emotional struggles, and I think sometimes your confidence as a parent goes out the window. There's so much out there, isn't there, when you're raising a very small child, about how to do it, and you've got this amazing, generally bigger support network. But I think once they get to primary school, it's a bit more. The sudden and older, there becomes so much more to navigate, and it's just nice to have that sort of toolkit. I think was what we were thinking.
I must say, it's very pragmatic. So it not only is it enjoyable, fun, and visually appealing. I mean, I tried to match the vibrant colours.
Oh, I love it.
As you can see, I'm inspired. It just lifts off the page, and a really wide variety as well. So I think for children to have something that is usually in the domain of fun after school, after you've done your homework, but this I think is absolutely essential for their mental health, and it's such a great start for them if they could pick it up and work on it, not work on it, have fun with it.
Yeah, Colin's actually made some of the exercises, the publishers, into lesson plans. So schools have been able to download them from the site and use them, which is lovely, really, because they lend themselves to lessons really well, don't they? They've got scientific backing, an activity, and a simple explanation of why it works.
Very excited about that. Very excited. Would you be happy talking about what it was like for each of you growing up?
Yeah. Okay. Well, gosh, I had an unusual upbringing in a way, and my dad was a lot older than my mum. And he was a bookie, he was a racecourse bookie, and he was a bit of a gambler, and he was a bit of he was just always doing this, that and the other. But we lived in a very posh little suburb, so we were quite different to the other families that lived there. But I had this amazing mother who was so warm and welcoming that somehow made everything okay, even though we were this quite unusual family. Both my sister and I were very academic, so despite the fact we came from a family that couldn't care less about academia, we both went on to study, and we had a really lovely childhood, but we were a very different family. So we both learnt very early on, I think, to be resilient. We had to be resilient to cope in this very middle class area when we were from a very working class family. So we've both, as adults, been quite entrepreneurial and quite ambitious and quite confident, because we sort of faced challenges early on about fitting in, and I think we realised we couldn't, so we just were ourselves entirely, and that worked for us. I was very close to my grandparents too, and spent a lot of time with them. My granny was paralysed completely and lived in a bed in the living room, so we did all her care. So I was a young carer, and we'd go before school, give her a bed bath, and after school, and look after her and feed her and all that. So there's a lot of caring in my childhood, but yeah, quite wonderful, really.
Number of challenges there as
A
well.
lot of
Were you
challenges.
aware that it was difficult?
Yes.
And did you have any issues that you felt?
Yeah, there was a lot of worries about not being able to pay the rent and things like that with my pet. Do you know, there was always money worries, and my mum was very tired. She kept a lot of it together, and she had health problems too. And yeah, but I felt very secure. I had a very secure childhood, and the friends I had in my childhood are still my best friends, even now as an adult. And I went off to university, but came back home to live in Nottingham. My parents both died now, which is sad, and they died really when I was quite young, but I had everything I needed to carry on. They really made me always feel loved, and that gets you through everything, doesn't it, I think? So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. What about you, Penny? What was it like growing up for
You
you?
explained so much about how you about the many of the things that you wrote in the book about kind of relating to older people and making other people happy. I had a really happy childhood. I think I was really, really lucky. And my mum, as I was saying, was a play therapist. So I think therapy was always quite a creative, playful part of my upbringing. Mum was doing a psychology degree while I was growing up. So I think she would talk to me a lot about what she was learning and what, she would tell me about psychology and got me quite interested in psychology, I think. And then I think just really gave me a toolkit of things for life. And as we've said, a lot of the activities in the book are, breathing exercises, rating your day, mindfulness, and lots of strategies. I remember her sitting down with me when I was getting really worried about death at 7, and sort of I had a little worry book and we would write down all my worries and then review them, And it was a bit like the activity that Becky wrote in one of the chapters about
the worry session.
Yeah, having a worry
like
session. No, it's wonderful. So I probably was in play therapy for most of my childhood, but it's given me lots of techniques. My dad was much more pragmatic man and much more practical, but nature's incredibly important to him. He's now spending most of his retirement sort of bird watching and travelling around the country, and so I think I've always had that kind of reverence and love of nature from him, and I think that stood me really well, and gardening and things that have stood me in really kind of good stance for whenever I've got stressed. I remember coming back from university and feeling very depressed towards the end of my degree, and Mum giving me this whole kind of toolbox of things to try over the weekend, and so I think I've given a lot of skills, a lot of things.
Very fortunate to have that support inbuilt.
Yes.
What other life challenges did you go through, and how did you overcome them?
I've always struggled with seasonal affective disorder. I found CBT really helpful, and I think just the things that women often struggle with is shaping a career around children, shaping your life around children, and kind of the pull of wanting to be a mother, but also wanting to be other things as well. And blogging's been an amazing forum for that, hasn't it?
Yeah,
to be surrounded by really powerful women, kind of making their own way in different ways, and
being able to work at 3 in the morning in your pajamas. Helpful.
It's very therapeutic to be able to write as well. Yes. So one of your tools. How about you? Any life challenges that come to mind? Which to go for first?
So many. Obviously, I've had health problems. So I married young. I married an American man. I was very young, and that didn't quite work out at all. And various things. I think the biggest challenge to me is losing my parents. Yeah, that was really hard because my security was very much wrapped up in the fact that they loved me so much, and they would take care of me and they helped me through things. And without them, I suddenly had to be a grown-up, and I found that incredibly difficult because I hadn't taken a lot of emotional responsibility for myself. I'd just gone to Mum when there was a problem, and she'd scoop me up and set me back on track. And whilst that was lovely, then when she's gone, it was a massive loss. And I was this adult who was supposed to cope, but I wasn't really very adult. And I have found that incredibly difficult. And it's been about 8 years now. It's still not easy. Yeah, I've befriended a lot of my friends' parents and spent time talking to them. I almost still feel I need that adult in my life. And I've learned kind of what I miss most about my mum and tried to find it in other places, but it took me a while to get there. Yeah.
So for both of you, self-development has been interwoven in your lives. And what are your experiences in therapy, if any?
Well, I trained as a psychotherapist about 20 years ago now. And part of that training, I had to have 40 hours of therapy as part of the qualification process. So I went into it thinking, it's just something I've got to tick off my list, and I found it quite overwhelming, really. I wasn't expecting. 40 hours is a long time, isn't it? So it couldn't just be something I ticked off my list. We did get to the difficult stuff, and I found it, I found I really explored things I'd not really looked at, and faced things that I had just shoved away. And I came away from it in the end, I think, with a better understanding of why I was how I was and how I behaved, and could look at changing some things. But I did find it very emotional. And I think I went down before I went up. But I think that's, from then giving therapy myself, I think that's something that can often happen. People really are looking at their lives, aren't they? And it can be quite a shock to lay it all out on the table. But then sort of gathering it back up and deciding what to take forward was, So it was a good experience, but it was hard work, I found,
And how did you find your therapist?
Well, I don't think I picked very well, actually. I had to have somebody who was accredited because they had to fit this. And I wanted a Christian counsellor. My faith's really important to me. And at the time I thought, well, she'll understand. I won't have to explain things to her because actually she'll understand because we've got this common ground. It didn't actually work like that because although that label of Christian was there, it's a broad spectrum, isn't it? And I found it a little judgmental, I have to say, which I wasn't expecting because just because somebody's a therapist doesn't mean they're not going to, that's something we try and offer as therapists, isn't it? But of course she's a person too. And I felt sometimes a little judged by her. So I would pick differently next time. I think I'll probably go more on recommendations if I was ever to go down that road again, rather than just looking for a little label that seemed to fit. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. A lot of people will often ask for to see a therapist with similar background or experiences, for example, post-war veteran, etc. But not necessarily is it the most helpful thing because you're looking at a person, not necessarily, and their lives certainly won't be the same.
Absolutely. And then, of course, if you have a conflict with your faith, which I was going through a bit at the time, and she didn't have, that can make it quite awkward. Yeah, I think it would have been better to have someone who absolutely had nothing in common with me, really. Yeah.
How would you describe your therapist? What were they like? What sort of style? And
she was lovely. She was person-centered therapist because that's what I trained at. So it was in the same thing, which I liked. I would have liked a little bit more direction, I think, because I was floundering, and sometimes she just sat with me and with my feelings and let me explore them. And I wanted to be rescued. I would feel frustrated. However, I think there was worth in that because I'd been pretty much rescued from my feelings all my life by my very loving mother, and I think I needed to learn to sit with them and find my own path. But I did find her very warm and caring. I think she genuinely cared about me, and I felt that, and that was lovely. I did really feel that. I can't really describe how she did that, but she just sat with me. But yeah, towards the end, I think I'd finished. I think you get to a point where you think, oh, I'm ready now to go back out into the world, really. Yeah.
Did you have any preconceptions before you saw a therapist?
Yeah, I thought she was
going to be like?
I did, even though I knew she was a person-centered therapist. I thought she'd give me a bit of analysis and a bit of, this is why you're doing this, and tell me what was going on and why I was feeling like I was feeling. And she didn't. So yeah.
What about your experiences of therapy?
Mine was related to seasonal affective disorder. We moved house, so we moved to a hilltop in the middle of nowhere. It was very kind of isolated. The weather was horrific at times. It was the worst winter for a long time, and obviously my vitamin D levels had just plunged, and the stress of moving had caught up with me, and I felt very, very, very depressed. So the doctor suggested referring myself for CBT, and I got really lucky and managed to tap into that. And at first I thought I don't want to talk about feelings. I don't think that's a problem. I want practical solutions. I think I'd got into this circle of chaos. I'm a very organised person, but I think when things fall, when you get down and you lose all of those skills. So we have very simple kind of, sounds ridiculous, kind of reorganising your life and exercises to look at how you're spending your time. But actually what I realised was I was planning myself the most ridiculous busy to-do list, never celebrating my achievements and not planning very much pleasurable into my day. So just having somebody walking through kind of reorganising your day and thinking about things and just getting you to actually recognise what you have achieved was phenomenally powerful. And actually I remember my husband saying to me earlier this sort of winter, saying, I just looked at your diary, it's all colour-coded, it's amazing, it's like you're so organised. And actually I've had no symptoms at all this winter. I think I've managed it really well.
So how long were you in therapy for?
Only sort of a couple of months, but yeah.
And we get really excited, wouldn't you, about let me tell you what she's told me, your little tools and things.
Yeah.
It's really,
it's such simple things, but for me, I think I'm a bit of an organisation geek, but I'm very good at self-sabotage as well, so if I'm not feeling it, then I will just, all that will go out the window.
You would return to it if...
No, I mean, I think it's part of the way I organise my life now, and it is very, very much like the book, very practical skills.
What's her personality like as a therapist?
Just really calm and reassuring, and always pointing out what you have achieved for you, I think, which is, or asking you to think about what you have achieved, and to gently remind you that you're doing a lot. So, yeah.
And did you have any preconceptions, given that therapy was in your family background already?
I suppose I've always thought of therapy as, as Becky was sort of describing it, as really going into the emotional things, which I don't think I've ever been that prepared to do. But I actually love the fact that it's quite practical, and I suppose that, I've been to visit my mum at work, and her play therapy room was always lots of different things that you could pull off the shelf for any kind of eventuality, really. And I think that's CBT really let me see that therapy can be so many things. And there are so many tools that I'm sure you therapists would use in your practice to suit the individual.
Yeah. So both of you, it seems, have a really good sense of what you need to do to keep you well.
Yeah, I think I've learned a lot from writing the book.
And your well-being tips, which we've written on a paddle board, would you like to share those?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that I've learned a lot of new skills recently. I think I started the year with that, oh my gosh, I need goals. And sometimes you don't know what those goals are. Sometimes you have to try new things and decide what sticks. And so I've done an upholstery course, which have absolutely blown me away. I nearly cancelled it, and then I read something about just trying things again. I thought, yeah, no, that's what I need to do. And planning our garden, doing a garden design. Skills that kind of just challenge you in new ways and make you feel like you're moving on. So for me, that's important, I think.
Lovely. I share that. New skills,
lifelong
wherever
learning.
I can.
Yeah.
There's also a great sense of progression. So you're starting from scratch, and you can see how far you've come, and that in itself is an endorphin boost.
No, definitely. Yeah. Endorphins everywhere, I think. Yeah.
And I put my wellbeing tip was to hug people that you love. And I think really for me that symbolises, with having kids, most of my time and energy went into working and my kids. And I lost a sense of that I needed friends and cheering on and people to be interested in me. And I've really tried to make sure over the last year that I bring my friends back into my life and more, make time to see people who love me and are interested in me, because we all need filling up, don't we? And I think I was giving a lot out and not having that in. And so I do quite a lot of walking now, and I try and make sure I arrange to walk with other people and just have that bit of time with them, or just have a quick coffee. And even when I want to say, oh no, actually I'm busy, I try and make myself do it, because I know I come away feeling refreshed. So that hug doesn't have to be physical, it can be kind of metaphorical too. Having people that love you around you is really important, I think. And it's something I definitely thrive on, but I'd kind of forgotten that I needed it along the way.
I think I've forgotten it too, so thanks for the reminder.
I think you do, because and I think it's instinctive and it's primitive, isn't it? We care for our children and we want to give them, all of us, but sometimes you can end up feeling a bit empty, can't you, yourself? And yeah, we need hugs too, don't we?
We do. That's why I grabbed you right away.
Yes,
it's like you say the word hug and I'm there.
Yes, yeah.
I'm there. What would you suggest to someone who is struggling, who's listening or watching right now, and who's struggling with their mental health? What words would you say to them?
I would say talk about it, talk to somebody about it, someone that cares about you, have a chat with them and tell them what's going on. They might offer you suggestions, they might just offer you a listening ear, they might point you in the direction of a great therapist, they might give you a big hug. But just sharing it just takes away that sense of isolation, because that just makes everything worse.
I think there are so many tools and so many different tools, and I think we can be quite resistant to the idea of help, but there's so many different ways that you can kind of, and the book's absolutely jam-packed with tools that children could use, but I think therapy as well is also jam-packed with lots of different ways, and we can be afraid and not quite realise how down we are, or how far we need to come back up, but also that moods change, don't they, and they pass, and that life isn't just about happiness. There are so many emotions in one day.
I would agree. I think the book is jam-packed. I think it's excellent. I would definitely put it on my list of recommendations of someone who needs a lift, and also who wants to craft a meaningful and purposeful life, an enjoyable one as well. So I think absolutely brilliant book, one that I will be recommending. And at what point do you think therapy would ever be recommended or indicated? Do you have views on child therapy and play therapy, given your family background?
I have worked with children who've been bereaved therapeutically, and used a lot of storytelling with them, and we'd use puppets and story stones and things to get them talking. And the children that came to me just weren't moving through. Things weren't getting better. They were getting progressively worse, and they were starting to close in on themselves and stop talking to their parents, stop expressing how they feel, and the behaviour had become quite either completely introverted or completely unmanageable. And I think the parents at that point thought, well, there's a problem here. But actually, it's a shame if it gets to that point. I think recognising that therapy can be very healthy without you having to be in crisis first is something we need to try and get out there, isn't it? Like, that this is just as good for you as going to a spa, or, you know, you might go and buy yourself a new outfit to cheer yourself up. Actually go to therapy and help yourself, but get a few tools along the way. The kids that I work with, at the end of it, will still be incredibly sad about the person who died, but they've been able to talk about it. They've been able to talk about that person without worrying about upsetting mum or their sister or whatever, and they've been able to say all the things they've regretted, and they were unburdened, you know, and lighter. And I think it can be a very healthy thing for children. I don't think
see
it has
the
to be
smile on
heavy.
my face. Preventative therapy.
Yeah.
It
doesn't have to be heavy and terrible, and only when they're suicidal or deep in self-harming, or it can be, you know what, they're not doing so great, so maybe they need some help. Just like you go for physio if your knee was bad, wouldn't you? You wouldn't wait till your knee was broken. You'd go and do some exercises. And I think if we think of therapy like that, rather than a crisis situation, it could be really beneficial.
And I think there's such a dearth of sort of services on the NHS, and you know, you will get seen if you are suicidal as a child at the moment, and you won't get anything else. So, I think, you know, if we do access some kind of therapy for our children, it also teaches them in later life that, you know, it's not something that you have to do as a last resort at the end of your tether. It's something that can keep you on an
But it
even
needs to be
keel.
affordable, accessible, creative, and responsive to the individual child, doesn't it? And I think all those things are perhaps barriers. People don't think it's going to be like that. So I think letting them know through books like this,
Absolutely,
you
there's
know,
books on
and through
prescription. This should
affordable
be-
therapy, and therapy can actually be quite fun, can't it? My friend said her daughter made a happiness collage. Something we suggest in the book is to make a collage of all the things that make you happy. And her daughter, who's quite a driven young lady and quite hyper, sat and made this collage. And she said she normally goes to bed and she's on YouTube and looking at this. And she said she slept really well. And I think it made her happy to think about what she loved. But actually it also made her mum really happy, because she'd included on the list things like being with you and being with Grant and my brother, and when we go and do this. And it was things her mum had no idea they made her happy. And she says now she knows what more to put in her life. Her daughter slept well. And it wasn't a heavy thing at all. She just made a happiness collage. But it was a little bit of therapy, a little bit of therapeutic time. And it was really rewarding for both of them, you know. So yeah, it can be simple, can't it?
Absolutely.
Lovely. Well, you're well on your way to helping a lot of people, and I wish you every success with this book
Thank
and
you.
any others that are to come. I think this is for all age groups, not only children. I'm really happy that I got my hands on it, and we'll be sharing it. And thank you so much for joining us here today, Becky and Penny.
Thank you for having
Thank
us,
you.
Sheri.
Thank you, Sheri.
HarleyTherapy.com is here to help you book counselling with qualified professional therapists, online or in person, at times and prices that suit you, wherever you are worldwide. If this is your first listen to Therapy Lab, do hit subscribe to keep up to date with new episodes. If you feel you'd benefit from therapy and want to transform your life, visit HarleyTherapy.com to find a qualified therapist anywhere in the UK and worldwide via Skype. We'll see you next time.